Hello and welcome to Raising Reef. In this video I would like to show you my reef system, talk about how it works and show you the equipment that I use. Now this is going to be a general overview. I'm not going to go into too much detail about every piece of equipment, that would take far too long, but I will give you a basic tour and then at the end I will talk about some future plans I have for this aquarium. To give you some context, this aquarium came about as a result of breaking down my previous system. This was a 6 foot by 2 foot by 2 foot large aquarium that I designed myself. I ran it for about 2 years. I decided to shut it down when I came to the conclusion that I wanted to move house. The thought of moving a big giant tank like that along with all my other belongings to a new property just wasn't something that I wanted to do, so I sold off a lot of the coral and I was about to list the tank when one of my tank maintenance customers, oh yeah that's right, I do some tank maintenance for other people that don't know how to or don't have the time to maintain their own tanks, so I'll go in there once a week and do some maintenance for them. Like I said, I was talking to one of my maintenance customers. I happened to mention I was selling my tank, and based on looking at a few photographs of it, they decided they wanted to buy it. So I thought great, but then I realised I had to move the tank because I'm their maintenance person. So yeah, it's kind of bittersweet really. So I ended up having to move the tank, but in the process of breaking the tank down, originally I decided that I was going to take a little break from the hobby and set up a new tank when I moved house and I knew where I was going to put it and all the rest of it, but it didn't quite work out that way. There was some livestock in the tank that I wanted to keep, so I thought about setting up a little nano tank, but then there was probably a bit more stock in there that I wanted to keep, and running a little nano tank I thought I might get a little bit bored with that, so I thought about something a little bit bigger. So my original plan, once I decided to set up another tank, was to have some glass cut, and I was going to assemble the tank myself, drill the holes, fit all the plumbing, because I'd never done that before on a tank and I thought it might be interesting, a nice project. But during the process of planning this tank came up for sale, so I went to have a look at it and it was almost the same dimensions that I was looking for. It's a nice little tank and I thought it will do for now. So I bought the tank and brought it home. It didn't look quite how it looks now. It came on a different stand. It was a white wooden, I believe it was a homemade stand. I've never seen a stand sold like that before. It was hideous. It was absolutely hideous. So eager to set it up. I set it up on the stand anyway, sorted out the plumbing. I had to reconfigure the plumbing a little bit from how it was designed in order to make it a bit more quiet. Having a quiet aquarium is important to me. I don't like all the noise that comes along with disturbing you when you're trying to enjoy your life around the aquarium itself. So I set up the aquarium. At this time I got a friend of mine to start making a steel frame for it, and I ordered some wooden claddings, as you can see on there now. It's MDF, which is veneered in oak, and I had those cut to size and I just finished them up and made some clips to attach them to the frame. The aquarium sits on a piece of MDF on top of the frame, and then there's another piece of MDF making a shelf at the bottom for the sump to sit on. I'll show all that in a little bit. So the flow in the aquarium is provided by Ecotech Marine Vortec MP10s. They work really well. They run on the Reef crest mode, so they ramp up and down sort of randomly. They're not connected together, so they do that independent of each other, and it creates a nice turbulent flow that all of the livestock seem to appreciate. So the lighting on this tank is that Aqua Illuminations Hydra 26 HD LED. I've been running it on this tank for the last 6 months or so, and I'm very impressed with its performance. It creates just the right lighting spectrum at the right intensity to keep corals growing happy and healthy. I've noticed a massive increase in the coral growth and better colours since adding this unit to my system. Just to the side of the main aquarium you can see a small tank here. This is a nano tank from TMC. It's a Micro Habitat 30. It's one of the original ones they brought out, so it's a Perspex box. It has a filtration built into the back, but I've disregarded that and I've drilled the back to allow it to drain into the sump, and I have a feed pump that pumps the water up into it. I use it as a refugium to grow macroalgae, as you can see in there now, and there's also a reef lobster that lives in there because he's not reef safe and we can't trust him around the clownfish in the main tank. So if we take a look at the sump, this is an area where we'll keep all the equipment that we want to filter the water with that we don't want on show and we don't want in the aquarium up the top. We have a massive protein skimmer here. It's ridiculously oversized for this sort of tank. This is a 200 litre tank. This is a skimmer rated for 1300 litres, I believe. It was left over from my big system that I mentioned earlier, and I put it on here because it was the best option I had at the time. I was going to replace it. It seems to be doing a good job. There is a plan in the future to sort all of that out, but I'll get to that later. You'll also find a small reactor that I use to tumble biopearls. There's another media reactor down here that I use to hold phosphate media to remove nutrients from the system. There's also a calcium reactor over in the back that you probably can't see from this image. That provides all of the major and minor elements that the corals need in order to stay healthy. And then in the next chamber of the sump we have the return pump and the auto top up. We also have a couple of heaters down in this section of the tank. I could prefer to keep two heaters that are lesser powered so that if one sticks on, it's not got the capabilities of overheating the tank, and together they can maintain a decent tank temperature. Also, I keep an aquarium temperature controller connected to the system. I have the two heaters plugged into that, and in the event that one or both of them sticks on and starts to raise the temperature up, that will override the plug and switch them off. In the event that it continues to get too hot, not because of the heaters but just general ambient temperatures, it's also connected to a couple of fans that I have mounted on the underside of the cabinet, which will blow cool air down onto the surface of the water, helping to create a little bit more evaporation and hopefully cooling the system back down again. Other than that, I have a plethora of other little bits and bobs that I use around the tank. I've got some coral cutters, I have a couple of pairs of tweezers. One of the most essential items around a reef tank is a toothbrush for cleaning various bits of equipment and getting into little nooks and crannies, cleaning bits up. I have some iodine that I dose to the system. We'll talk about that in another video. A couple of test kits, some frag plugs, some calibration fluid for the calcium reactor pH probe. That is run from a controller which sets the pH and monitors it and maintains it. Also behind the tank there is a CO2 fire extinguisher which I use to feed the calcium reactor with carbon dioxide gas. This helps to lower the pH, melt the media and provide the corals with all of the elements they need. I will go into that in much more detail in a future video, but like I said, this is just an overview for now and just to see where we're at and what we're running and how we're doing it. So just below the refugium here we have a container that we keep our fresh RODI water in. That's reverse osmosis deionized water that we create ourselves, and that will replace any evaporated water from the system as and when needed. There's a little sensor that will trigger as the water level drops in the return section of the sump, and it will top it back up to the level of where the sensor's set. All in all, this equipment all works together to create a nice stable environment. It helps to keep the water temperature right, the salinity is good, the trace elements, the major and minor elements are being replaced by the calcium reactor, nutrients are being exported by the reactors and the skimmer, excess nutrients are being exported from the system by the corals themselves, the two reactors that are running simultaneously here on the front, the skimmer behind, and the algae growing in the refugium. There's also some biological filtration happening in the rock itself within the aquarium. We'll get into that in another video, but this gives you an overview of what's going on in this tank. So let's talk about the livestock that I keep in this tank. It's a mixed reef, so there's a big variety of different coral in there. There's some SPS, some LPS, and some soft corals. I have a variety of invertebrates. I have some various types of snail, some different types of crab. I have an urchin, and I have a shrimp. I only have 4 fish in this tank at the moment. I have my 2 clowns that I've had for over 6 years. I have a sulphur goby in there, and there's a firefish. Sad story, the firefish was one of a pair. They were in there quite happy together, but I believe that the clown got a bit moody during the egg laying process and spooked one of them, and it jumped out of the tank. Now, I do have a cover on this tank to stop that from happening, but it came with the tank and it's not quite the right size to cover the entire tank. There is a small gap at the back, and on this occasion the firefish found that gap and ended up down the back. It happened whilst I was out. I didn't notice it for a while. When I did notice it was missing and checked around the tank, I found it down the back, and by this time it was too late. It had dried out and gone all crispy crunchy. This is a terrible way to lose a fish. If anybody is looking to keep fish that are prone to jumping, I would recommend that they have a jump guard on their tank. So that pretty much concludes the tour of this tank. Like I said, I've got some future plans for it, which involves a new tank, which I have on order, which should be coming next week. It's exactly the same size as this tank. There is a small difference in the way that the weir functions, and it doesn't have all the scratches that I found out this tank has on it. Whether I caused those scratches or whether they came with the tank, I'm not quite sure, but the scratches are there. So I've ordered a new tank. I've also ordered a new steel frame, which I have in the garage. That's ready to go. I've cut a piece of MDF for the top of that. That will allow me to set the tank on top of the frame and start working on the plumbing whilst this tank is still running. In the process of doing that, I also plan to repurpose some old glass from another tank, and I want to make a new sump for this tank with a different configuration, so I can include the refugium, where I grow my macroalgae, into the sump itself. I can replace the skimmer with a smaller skimmer, and there should be enough for all of the equipment in there along with that. And then I can utilise the small nano tank that I'm using currently as the refugium to house the 2 clownfish. They'll be happy in there, they'll be able to lay their eggs and not feel threatened by anybody. That will allow me to add some new livestock to the main aquarium, which is all very exciting. If this is the sort of thing that you'd like to see more of, then don't forget to subscribe to this channel. If you hit the bell notification, you'll get a notification as soon as the next video is up. And if you hit that like button, that will let me know that this is the sort of thing that you're interested in watching, and it'll encourage me to make more videos more often. I think the next one coming up will be how I grow phytoplankton at home. I'm also going to be building a sump, and I'm going to be cutting up some old glass and making a new sump from that, so that might be interesting for somebody to watch. If that's the sort of thing that you're interested in, don't forget to subscribe. So until the next video, all the best.